So just a reminder again, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box to the right of your screen, or wherever it might show up on yours. So if you have questions, you can put them there, and then I'll publish them live if they're general questions that everybody wants to know about as well. Okay, so I think we'll get started. We still have about 20 people. Hopefully we'll get some more people on as we go. But welcome to the 6th virtual mineralogy lecture. And I see nowadays that there's actually a couple of different groups that are, yeah, I can see 20 so far. Steve asked if we have, if I can see how many people so far, 20. So yeah, I have Steve and Liz on, I know that, but I'm not quite sure who else is on. But yeah, there's a few other groups that are putting on online lectures now. I noticed the one from the States that's being put on as a kind of interview sessions with different mineralogists and curators, which is interesting as well. So I think there's a market here, not a market, I guess, in terms of paying market, but a definitely a niche to be filled if this continues any longer and we can't have in-person conferences or seminars. So anyway, so today I'm going to talk about some diamond mining in Russia, in Siberia, and this is kind of prompted from a trip I took in 2018 to Yakutia, where we visited Yakuts and then went down to Mirny as guests of Alrosa Mining Company. And Quinton and Willow, if they're online, I mean, they can tell you a little bit more. They managed to get underground and see the processing plant, whereas when we went, the mine had been flooded and a cave-in had happened, and they're figuring it's probably 20 years before they start up again, and about $5 billion to pump the mine and get the underground workings still going. But on the other end, Alrosa has dozens of mines in Siberia, and they're looking for more all the time, so they're not short of cash anyway. So today we're going to talk about, this was originally done for, well, partly done for the Women in Science Month a number of years ago, or Women in Science Year. And this story is interesting because it's actually women who discovered this main deposit, the first deposit in Mirny, and the hurdles that they had to go through to be accepted by the male geologists and recognized for their efforts. Let's start here. So we're going to talk about diamonds. We're going to talk a little bit about geology, and so we got 27 people on now. That's better. A little bit about diamonds, a little bit about geology, and then basically a field trip show and show you some of the pictures from the mine and the history of the mining in this area. So everybody's probably heard of graphite, heard of diamond, and I know this is kind of a mixed presentation just for people that are a little bit new. So I know we do have kids that are young mineralogists that are on the talk as well. So tell them a little bit more. So carbon polymorphs in nature, we basically have two, graphite and diamond, but there's a number of different other polymorphs of carbon that are formed in not only in nature, but that are organic as well. So from the inorganics point of view, we're looking at diamond and graphite, but then you can get things like buckyballs that are 60 carbon atoms together, and a full range of nanotube sheets and that people are creating in labs for different technological reasons and for material science purposes. So we're going to look at diamond and graphite, and they're basically just all composed of carbon, and it's the way that they're bonded together that gives them their different look. In terms of looking at a piece of graphite, you're not going to put it in a ring versus a diamond that's nice and hard and shiny and people want in engagement rings. The two of them are the exact same thing. They're just carbon bonded together, but the way that they are bonded actually controls how what the mineral is and all of its properties. So if we look at diamond and graphite, they're again just carbon, but in diamond the bonding is all, every carbon atom is actually bonded to another carbon atom. So there's no gaps in the structure. There's no other atoms in the structure. Well, you can if you start talking about different types of diamonds that they have nitrogen and other impurities or defects. But we're going to talk just diamond by itself with just carbon. So every carbon atom is bonded to another carbon atom, another 4 carbon atoms, and a tetrahedron, and we get what's called a covalent bond. So it's a sharing of electrons between those two carbon atoms, as opposed to ionic, where it's a give and take of electrons and it's a positive negative charge attraction. In covalent bonds, it's a nice strong bond. So carbon has strong bonds in all directions, which gives it that kind of equant cubic look to it. So there's no preferential bonding in one direction or the other, like you have in something like a feldspar, where if you hit it, it will break into little cubes, not cubes, sorry, but little kind of smaller feldspar crystals in two directions just because of the bonding. In this case, we have the same type of bonding throughout the entire mineral, so you get very equant bonding, very unequant structure. Whereas in graphite, we have kind of the opposite. We have sheets of carbon atoms that are in little hexagons. So there's 6 carbon atoms that are in one ring, and those rings are all bonded together by carbon atoms as well, with covalent bonds. But the difference is that between those sheets of carbon atoms, we actually have van der Waals bonds, and van der Waals bonds are just very, very weak forces that are holding those layers together. So it's kind of like a hydrogen bond, but even weaker than that. So those van der Waals bonds are actually holding those sheets together. And if you look at a graphite crystal, and you can see that it's in sheets, and this is why we use it in pencils, is that when you rub it, it actually breaks those bonds, those very weak bonds, and that sheet will peel off. So it's peeling in between the bonds. So the structure of graphite is giving us the properties of graphite, that kind of lubricant effect and that sheet effect that we can use in pencils, in different mechanical lubricants. It's also very light, so it's strong in the one direction. So it's actually used for things like bikes and tennis rackets or squash rackets. And but because it's strong in that one direction, when it does break, if anybody's ever seen what happens to a carbon frame bicycle when it gets hit by a car, it just splinters and it's completely not repairable. But in that one direction, it's actually very strong. Whereas with diamond, in all 3 directions, it's actually very strong. And so with graphite, when we look at graphite crystals, we quite often see these nice hexagonal crystals. And this is a picture I stole off of Mindat this morning. Nice hexagonal crystals which mimic the crystal structure. And just like a mica, you can peel those sheets apart. Whereas with diamonds, we're always going to get a fairly equant crystal, whether they're octahedrons or cubes or even different variations on that. You get penetration twins and things, but they're always going to look like kind of a cubic, very equant crystal, and also much harder. So how do diamonds form? And I'm not a diamond expert, so we're not going to get into the different types of diamonds and what causes the colors and that, but I can tell you something about the geology. So we can actually have 4 different ways that diamonds form. And the standard one where we're looking at that people actually mine are from what are deep source eruptions, so from kimberlites. So they're bringing up diamonds from the diamond stability zone. You can actually get diamonds from meteorite falls. So from that impact of a meteorite into the ground, you can actually get microdiamonds forming. From an asteroid impact, the same thing, you can get microdiamonds forming. And you can also get them forming in subduction zones if the pressure and temperature is right and the composition of the subduction zone is right. So the main one we're going to be looking at is the diamond stability zone from kimberlite. So these diamonds actually form deep in the mantle, and we call it the diamond stability zone because this is where the temperature and the pressures are ideal to have a diamond forming. So it's about 150 to 250 kilometers deep down in the mantle. And the pressures have to be about 45 to 60 kilobars, which is about 50,000 times higher pressure than what we find here on the surface of the planet. And the only place you can get this really in the Earth's crust is under stable cratons. So in order to get that much pressure deep in the mantle, you have to have a lot of material that's overlying it. And the only places that happens are in places like the Canadian Shield, where you have a buildup of continental crust that's been there for a long time. It's very stable, and it's producing a keel, and it's sinking deep and deeper into the mantle. So this is putting more and more pressure down, and it's forcing kind of the gradient in the mantle deeper and deeper. With that overburden and with that pressure, you're going to start getting the pressures that you need, these 45 to 60 kilobars, and you're going to allow diamonds to form. The diamonds themselves forming there, they're coming from carbon sources that have been there since the beginning of time, basically. They also get some material being subducted through subduction zones from from sediments on the top that will force carbon down into the mantle as well. It gets recycled, but in order for diamonds to form, it's got to be forced deep enough that you can get these diamond stability zones. So in order to get something from way down here up into onto the Earth's surface or into something that we can mine, we have to have a source of magma that's coming from deeper in the mantle. So if the diamonds sit here in the diamond stability zone, in order to get them brought to surface, because there's nothing being formed, there's no magma really being formed right there. Magma is actually forming below the diamond stability zone, and it's going to travel through those that zone, pick up the diamonds, and bring them to the surface. But there's very few places on Earth that we can get that exact situation happening, where you can have something like a kimberlite magma forming and also a diamond stability zone that's deep enough and high enough pressure to get the diamonds that you need to actually have an ore deposit. And in order to get these things like kimberlites and chamafugites and lamprophires and all these really strange potassic rocks, you need one of these deep-seated continental crust. And we find these, like I said, in Canadian Shield. You can also find them in other parts of the world that have very deep, old crusts. So Canadian Shield definitely up in our Arctic, and then some down towards the Middle States, down in Brazil, of course, in parts of Russia, in Siberia, down in Australia, in Africa, of course, is some of the beginnings of diamond mining in Kimberley. And other parts of stable cratons in Africa as well. So as long as you have a very deep crust that's been there for a long time, and a lot of these diamonds are 1 billion to 3 billion years old, that's where you're going to get the possibility of these forming. The other thing is you need very deep-seated fractures. So if you don't have deep-seated fault lines in your continental crust, you don't have a mechanism that's going to be able to bring the magma up from deep down below up onto the surface. Well, not the surface, but they're kind of, pipes in the ground. So you can see all the red ones are Archean age, so they're 2.5 to 3.5 billion years old. Some of the other one, 1.5 to 2.5 million, and 600 to 1500 million years old. So 0.6 to 1.5 billion years old. So we don't get a lot of things that are fairly new. There are some younger Jurassic aged kimberlites out there, but the majority of these stable cratonic crusts that we're getting kimberlites forming are actually in very old, very deep crust. Here's the next one. So this is the kind of idealized look of what a kimberlite is, and kimberlites are the main source of diamonds. There are other strange rocks that host diamonds, like I say, some of the impact rocks, which we're not going to talk about here because they're not really. There are thoughts of mining them from some of the large meteorite impact craters, but in terms of producing minerals that are diamonds that are big enough to be display samples or in rings and that, we're really looking at kimberlite deposits. So these things come tearing up through the mantle in what's called a kimberlite cone or an intrusion. They're basically well, I mean, we don't actually know what they look like, but we can tell from drilling and mining that they are a very cone-shaped structure. They come up at a supersonic speed because they're very enriched in volatile, so they have a lot of gases in them. So when they do erupt, they probably go off with a bang. So they come up fairly violently, and they create a lot of breccia around them. They create different offshoots. You can get different dikes that form out of these pipes, and you get diamonds within that pipe. So when people are mining for diamonds, really, if you just especially up in the Arctic, because they're sitting in permafrost, if you look for large round lakes, that's one way to actually prospect them, because basically the top of the kimberlite pipe is just a round lake, and then it goes down from there. So you can just kind of look at Google Maps and see see, or Google Earth and see where all the round lakes are, and look at the diamond pipes in Canada's Arctic, and there at one point there were lakes there, which makes it an interesting task to be mining in Arctic, because you have permafrost and water and everything, and have to keep everything everything stable so that your pipe doesn't start collapsing on you. So basically, mining companies basically go into this pipe, and then they just start tunneling down into the pipe as a whole. Yeah, and that's just an image of what they look like. Nobody really knows what they look like coming up. But the thing about kimberlites is that they do come up very, very fast. They're very volatile rich, and when they come up, they drag all sorts of stuff along with them. So not only the kimberlite rock itself, which is a bit of a mishmash and looks like concrete for the most part. This is a piece of kimberlite from the Victor project here, and you can see it's nothing special. Like if you pick this up, most people wouldn't recognize this as a kimberlite. It looks like a piece of concrete or pavement or something from outside. This is a piece from the Mineralogy mine in Siberia, and again, it's nothing. It looks a bit darker green and kind of more rock-like, but again, it's got lots of different bits in it that are basically rocks that have been pulled up when the kimberlite came streaming up through the mantle and through the crust. So they're very heterogeneous rocks. They're not like other rocks, other igneous rocks that we see, for sure, not like cyanites and other alkaline rocks that we deal with. But they are an alkaline rock. They're just, instead of being sodium dominant, which is what things like sodalite cyanites and nepheline cyanites and that are, instead they're actually potassium dominant. So they're dominated by micas. They're dominated by potassium, other potassium minerals. So you can see they're very fragmented, very heterogeneous. This is a big garnet, but they have pieces of country rock in them. They'll have pieces of the mantle that it came ripping up through, and then every so often you'll actually get a diamond. Here's another one here. You can see they're very different from one to another, and they all look quite different from deposit to deposit, and also within a deposit, the different layers and the different zones are going to be actually quite different as well. So the kimberlite itself, if you exclude all of the other things that I've brought up in its travels, contains olivine, phlogopite, ilmenite, and pyrope generally. Sometimes chrome pyrope, which is what you're seeing here. These nice green garnets. Those big phenocrysts, so those are big crystals that have grown in the magma before it actually got transported to surface, and then it crystallized into a fine-grained matrix after that, which has basically the same mineralogy. So olivine, phlogopite, serpentine, calcite, magnetite, apatite, and perovskite. So those are some of the main matrix minerals of the actual kimberlite. And the serpentine and calcite is basically a product of the olivine and fluids and everything actually decomposing, and the magnetite too. If you start altering this, these things are so fluid rich, they alter pretty much in place, and you're going to get a whole suite of kind of secondary minerals in the matrix that are just there from having so many fluids running around the magma as it forms, as it cools. So kimberlite is actually named kimberlite from the town of Kimberley in South Africa, where they actually found an 83.5 carat diamond, which started the diamond rush there in 1869. And if you want to get kimberlite classifications and potassium alkaline rock classifications, they're actually quite complicated, but there's some good books out there. Roger Mitchell has a number of books on the classification of kimberlites, and if you pick up the MAC volume, the Mineralogical Association volume on alkaline rocks, there's a good summary of kimberlite classifications, and then it also goes into things like camafugites and lamporites and the other other potassic rocks that are actually really, really odd and only form in a few localities in the world. So we know that diamonds come from the diamond stability zone, and they're not actually formed in the kimberlite themselves. So they're actually just hitchhikers in the magma. So when the magma comes up, it happens to pass through the diamond stability zone, and it will pick up the diamonds as it goes, and it brings them to the surface, and they just happen to be in the kimberlite itself, and we can mine them from there. But they're not actually formed in the kimberlite. So we call them xenocrysts. So xenocryst is basically any mineral that is foreign to that rock. So if it's been picked up as the magmas travel through the mantle or through the crust, we call it a xenolith. So if you or xenocrust. So there's no chemistry that compares, or there's no genetic comparison between the rock and that xenocrust itself. So there's nothing to tie that diamond to the kimberlite. They're totally different entities. They just happen to be stuck together in the same deposit. And we have other things that form xenocrysts as well. These zircons that we've been working on in Cambodia are xenocrysts. This is an alkaline basalt, the matrix, and this is a nice, about centimeter-sized zircon xenocryst. And it formed, or it got caught up in that basalt and just got dragged along onto the surface. It just happens that the basalt passed through a large part of the mantle that had all these zircons in it, which to me sounds really cool, and just picked them up and brought them all to surface. A xenolith, on the other hand, which you've probably heard the term before, is just a piece of foreign rock that's been dragged up to the surface by another magma. So most of the time they're igneous rocks, but an igneous rock can come blasting through and pick up pieces of metamorphic rocks, of sedimentary rocks, although those are going to probably get cooked pretty well on their way up, or in the magma chamber, or on surface. So this picture here is a xenolith in one of these alkaline basalts, and it's a big peridotite xenolith. So it's basically just olivine and some magnetite and a lot of serpentine and carbonate. So this is also from Cambodia. But those xenoliths can be basically anything. It just means a foreign rock inside a magmatic rock. So even though we find diamonds in kimberlites, it doesn't mean that all kimberlites have diamonds. It's kind of a chicken and egg scenario here. So only 15% of kimberlite pipes are diamond bearing, and that means they contain diamonds. Doesn't necessarily mean they're actually viable as a mine. So only 1% of those kimberlite pipes that are diamond bearing, 1% of that 15% actually turn into a diamond mine. So you have a threshold that you need to meet in terms of, like any mine, whether it's a gold mine or a copper mine, and a threshold in order to actually make money on these mines. And most of these mines are actually not mining for the jewelry industry. They're actually mining for industrial diamonds, for drill bits and saw blades and things like that. So in terms of global diamond production, this is from 2017. Russia has the market basically on global production, and then Canada is actually in third place right now with 2.1 billion in sales every year, 14% of the market, whereas Russia has 35%, and then other countries have less than that. Botswana has 22%. So if we look at the actual supply, Alrosa company itself, which is the company that owns all the mines in Yakutia and other places in the world, has a 27.4% share of the market, whereas De Beers is 20.2%. So this is all across different countries. This isn't necessarily in one country, except for the government of Botswana and Namibia. Dominion Diamond, who's up north in Canada as well, Rio Tinto. So Alrosa, even though they're from one country and almost one area, they're controlling 27% of the market. So it's not De Beers that has the bulk control of the market right now. It's actually Alrosa. So why go to the far north of Russia? Well, we actually got invited there to go to the Yakutia International Youth Science Forum, and this was we got invited to go and well, I got invited to go and judge projects there, and Rennie was invited to go, and he was part of the organizing committee and kind of the consultant for the forum. So we traveled from Moscow, which is all the way over here. We landed in Moscow, and then we flew from Moscow to Yakutsk. And I didn't realize how big, I mean, you realize how big Russia is, but until you fly from Moscow to the other side of the country, you don't realize how big it is. That's an 8-hour flight from Moscow to Yakutsk. So it was a long day by the time we finally got to Yakutsk, which is the capital of Sakha, or the Yakutia state. So Yakutia in basically Siberia, so it's the northern part of Russia, the eastern part of Russia, and up towards the Siberian Sea. So it's a large state here, and it's not. It's a state that's made up of a lot of people that are more. I think they consider their language Turkic, which it's more of a kind of Asian culture as opposed to a Russian or European culture. So a lot of the people look more Inuit than they certainly do look Russian or Mongolian. Actually, there's a lot of kind of Mongolian Asian culture there. And if you compare some of their culture to our own Inuit, Northern Inuit residents, there's a lot of similarities there as well. So you actually don't quite feel like you're in Russia. You feel like you're more in Asia than anything, which is to be expected. We're kind of closer to Asia than anything. And it's actually quicker to fly to Korea and then to Yakutsk than it would be from Ottawa to Moscow to Yakutsk, but also more expensive. So we stopped in Yakutsk first, which is the capital, and then we went across over to Mirny, which is where all the mines are, and to west of Yakutsk, and then we flew back from Mirny to Moscow after that. So these are just some photos from the International Science Fair, what we were part of. Jeff Hoyle here is a prof at Dalhousie, and he organized. He's our national judge in chief here in Canada. So he organized the group of us, all from international judges, to be judging these projects by high school students in Yakutia. These are just some of the projects. So I was judging mostly natural science projects, which we don't tend to get a lot of here, which is actually kind of cool. These students were working on. The student had actually done her own plant pressing, which I was quite impressed with, and another student here who was looking at lichen and looking at the effects of pollution and things on lichen. We also got a chance to visit the Mammoth Museum, which is part of the university there in Yakutsk. So here, all these skeletons on display. They're actual real skeletons. This is a small elephant or small mammoth, baby mammoth here, and this is a horse that I have other pictures of here. This is kind of a rhino skin, I think, this one here. This is a baby horse that's been mummified in these are all taken from the permafrost around in Yakutia, and further north of Yakutia, actually, and then taken out of the permafrost when they're either mining or because of climate change, the permafrost is melting and these things slump, and then they find them. There's a big trade in, or black market trade in mammoth skeletons, mammoth tusks in Yakutia. It's supposed to be a government-run thing, but there is a big kind of black market for them when people find them and then sell them and sell them off to people that will then use the ivory. But all the ones in here are actually real. This is actually, it's hard to see, but this is actually a mammoth here. One tusk here, one tusk here. And this is the one, if you had heard of a number of years ago, where they took liquid blood out of an actual mammoth, and they were going to try and clone it, put it into an elephant, clone it with elephant DNA, splice it, and then try and actually sooner or later birth a mammoth. This is all the work. This is the actual body of the mammoth that it was. The work was done on a fridge or freezer in the museum that we got to actually see, along with a bunch of other random bits of things. There's another leg of something here, but it's actually pretty cool. So from Yakutsk, after the science fair, we actually flew to Mirny, and this was I got in touch with some of the mineralogists in Mirny and asked them if it was possible to come down and see their deposits and see their labs, and they were more than happy to have me come down and also give a few presentations about museum nature and what we do here in Canada. And they have a pretty impressive setup there in terms of labs in the middle of nowhere and the work that they're doing. And it's a pretty tiny little town. Alrosa has their own set of plains, so this is an Alrosa plain here, and they have their own airline company basically that moves people in and out of their mines, and also is fine for the public to use as well. So it's an interesting flight, quite a very old plane, and I'm not quite sure why you can't wear nylons on the plane. We didn't quite figure that one out. Or bring combs or anything on. High heels, apparently can't wear high heels either. But all these no smoking signs all over the place, and the baggage compartment of this plane was in the front, like it is on the planes going up to Iqaluit. And as soon as they closed the doors, the guys in the baggage compartment were smoking the entire flight. So not exactly, you know, American or Canadian American standards for flying. But I guess you have to take your nylons off if you're going to crash a plane. So this is we got a chance to visit with these three geologists at El Rosa, and they were very, very accommodating, and you know, showed us everything, talked to us, wanted to take us out for vodka and dinner and food and lots of coffee, and show us around their lab. So this is one of their main lab buildings in the town, and these two guys here are both mineralogists. Actually, the guy on the right, Vlad, he's actually an X-ray diffraction expert, and has done a lot of crystallography, which was cool to talk to him about. He didn't speak a lot of English at all, but he was very friendly and was interested in what we do and what our equipment was, and very happy to show us his equipment in the Mineralogy labs. This is Igor. He's the head of the mineralogy geology section in the exploration area at the museum at El Rosa. So along with visiting some of the mines, and I'll show you the mines in a minute, we got a chance to visit the kimberlite museum, and this is an entire museum dedicated only to kimberlite. So the only thing in this building, it's basically a labor of love from one of the geologists who used to work for El Rosa, and he started collecting pieces of kimberlite from all across the world, and they created this museum from it. So there's pieces of kimberlite, lots from Canada, from the Victor project. I brought them a chunk of this stuff, and they already had a couple samples, but it added to their collection. And just from all over, including every single layer of kimberlite in the deposits that El Rosa has, as well as from all over the world from other deposits and other companies. So this squirrel was randomly on top of one of the display cases, and I just thought he was hilarious. It was a little tufted ears, and it was like, and this is a little egg timer, basically, with, these are all diamond crystals, small diamond crystals in it. Be kind of nice to have on your desk. This is the man that created the Kimberlite Museum, and this is the guide that we had for the day who was showing us around, and they have quite a good educational setup showing how this is the Mineralogy mine here, so the underground part and then the pit, and talking about how kimberlites are formed, how diamonds are formed. But then every single one of these cases here has a piece of kimberlite that is different from everyone else. So it's quite impressive. They're all very well labeled. By country, the ones from Russia, all by every individual mine that El Rosa owns, and yeah, it's just it's quite amazing actually to go in and look at the variation of the different kind of textures and colors and everything that are formed from just one rock type. So from the history point of view in Russia, diamonds were first found actually in 1829 by a 14-year-old boy, and they didn't. It took a while before he was actually kind of recognized as to this was a diamond, but then after that, there was kind of a small rush, and people were finding them in the creeks and that. So in the next 50 years, they only found about 100 diamond crystals, and they're all really tiny. So people that were walking around the creeks and playing with rocks kind of downstream from some of these deposits. So it wasn't until the 1950s that diamond mining actually started or diamond exploration started seriously in Siberia, and it was actually due to two women, Natalia, and if Willow was with me or Quentin was with me, they would pronounce the last name, so forgive me, I'm not going to try. So Natalia and a student who joined her as a graduate student in 1953. So Natalia was a geologist, and she took on this graduate student as well in 1953. So they were working for the government, and they went into the field in 1953, the two of them together, so two women in the field with a larger party. They were with a larger party of men, but they actually wind up separating after that because she had some ideas of where they might find diamonds, and the men didn't agree with her. So she actually just they took off by herself with another guy and went off on their own way. And her idea was that if she was basically one of the first people to pioneer the idea of indicator minerals. So in kimberlites, if you have a certain suite of minerals, they often indicate that there will be diamonds present. So they indicate there's garnets, chrome garnets are a good indicator. Ilmenites that have a certain chemistry are a good indicator. Other garnets, pyropes that have a certain chemistry, are good indicators. So she put two and two together that if you have these certain minerals, especially the pyropes, is this little red garnet down in the corner, that if you followed those back to a source, that this is how you would find a kimberlite pipe. And she didn't really convince her male colleagues of that, so she went off her own, and they started walking around streams and looking. And it was at one of their campsites actually that they turned over a rock. They'd been following them in streams, so if you look at a kimberlite pipe, water is often flowing from them and they get eroded, so the minerals from the kimberlite, they erode fairly easily. We'll just keep falling downstream. So she was sitting at a campsite and picked over a rock to make supper one night, and lo and behold, it was a piece of kimberlite with a pyrope in it. So that prompted some further exploration on their part. The problem is that it started snowing, and they actually got stuck out in the field for a much longer time than they were supposed to, but they finally did get evacuated in October of 1953 after spending, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks extra in the field, where they shouldn't have been there. And I mean, it snows pretty early in Siberia. In this part of the country, it gets down to minus 50, minus 60, and lots of snow fairly early in the year. So it's not the best place to be stuck in October. But they went back the next year. So in 1954, she joined another expedition. And Larissa, the grad student, joined that expedition too. Larissa, as a grad student, she actually was pregnant at the time, and she wound up having an abortion because she didn't want to. She knew that if she said she was pregnant, they wouldn't let her go into the field. So she actually had an abortion and decided that doing field work and doing diamond exploration was a much more important task. And some of these tents and different artifacts they actually have in the Alrosa Diamond Museum that's in town. So after all of that, it wasn't until 2016, or sorry, this was the first diamond mine. Sorry, this is the first diamond mine that they actually found in the 1960s, 1950s, I guess. They actually did come to see that diamond indicator minerals were actually a thing, and they wind up finding the Zarnista mine. It was the first mine that was actually found in this region in 1954. So this is Larissa here. Another one of the geologists, and they actually had a local indigenous guide to bring them into some of the areas and to look around, and Pushok, the dog here, this cute little white dog. So this is actually a statue in Mirny of the three of them. So this is, I think, the only statue of a female geologist that exists in the world. So she was really instrumental in actually finding the mine, and in Mirny, they're they really celebrate the heritage that they have, being able to have a female geologist as the lead and the founder of these mines, and also the importance of having an Indigenous guide to lead them around around the territory. So this is Ekaterina Yelagina. She's actually the woman who found the Mir pipe. So this is the pipe that we visited in Mirny. The other one's kind of further off from Mirny, but there's a number of different pipes around here. They're all very close to each other. But she was the person who found the Mirny pipe in 1955. So right away, two of the biggest diamond mines in Siberia were actually found by women. This is the Mirny pipe today, and it truly is huge. It's the second biggest open pit in the world, the first one being the Bingham copper mine. But this one is absolutely massive, and it's not until you stand next to it that you realize how big it is. So it's 1.2 kilometers across. It's 525 meters deep, and the Bingham pit is only another 200 meters deeper than that, so not too much bigger. It produces, in its peak production, produced 10 million carats of diamonds a year, and it produces gem quality diamonds as well as producing industrial diamonds. But a lot of this pit is dominantly massive, huge, big diamonds. And we got a chance when we were in Yakutia to visit the state treasury, and although a lot of them, they had a lot of replicas, some of the biggest diamonds, still they had a lot of other real diamonds on display, and it was just incredible to see. We weren't actually allowed to bring our phones in to take pictures, so I don't have pictures from that. It was kind of a secret place. We had to be kind of frisked and told to leave anything from our pockets outside the museum, as well as the diamonds and gold and everything that was in there. It was just insane. And the length, if you were to drive it down here, it's 7.7 kilometers down. So the open pit itself is no longer active. You can see there's a lot of slumping happening here, and there's a lake at the bottom. It's actually flooded. So in 2015, it suffered a collapse. And the interesting thing about this mine is it has a layer of halite in it, down in the mine, and water and halite, as you know, don't mix very well, and that layer kind of let go, and the underground portion flooded, so it killed, I think it was 13 people, and they're looking at 20 years before it starts going, they'd be able to pump it and bring it back into production. This is what the underground operation looked like before it actually flooded and collapsed. So these big rotary saws, essentially, you just sit in there and carve up the kimberlite. It's brought up to surface, and it undergoes a number of separation and flotation processes before it spits out raw diamonds. So this is just a schematic of the mine itself, down to 800 meters below surface, 900 meters below surface. And I believe the flood started around here. It wasn't too deep in the mine, but it flooded all the bottom portions of the mine. So when they sort diamonds, basically they're sorting by size and shape, clarity and color. So industrial diamonds are things that are less than 0.03 carats and less than a millimeter, or 1.5 millimeters. And they account by sales for 30%. This is from the Mirny mine. 30% of sales and 2% of sales by value. So 70% of their sales by volume are gem quality samples, which are more than 1.5 millimeters and greater than 0.03 carats. By value, 98% of the stuff that's coming out of the Mirny mine is for gem quality material, and this isn't normal for most diamond mines. Most diamond mines, like I say, are actually producing more industrial diamonds than they are gem quality diamonds like this. So Mirny is a little bit exceptional in that sense, that it produces dominantly gem quality samples. So these are some of the biggest diamonds that have come out of the Mirny. This is 2017, the Jubilee pit. 82 carats, 108 carats, 163 carats. They're absolutely massive diamonds. I mean, they're just huge. So I want to show you some mineral pictures before as well, because we managed to get to the first Mineralogical Museum, which is in Moscow. After we flew from Marigny back to Moscow, we got a couple of days to wander around Moscow and got to see the Mineral Museum. So I contacted Dmitry Belikowski, who's one of the head curators there, and he managed to get to come and give us a tour and look around the museum and show us some of the special things that he had. So this is the inside of the Firstman Museum. It's a kind of old style wooden cabinets that are absolutely beautiful. It used to be an equestrian arena and a barn. So the windows on either side, these are actually the doors that the horses would come into, and it's a gorgeous space. So beautiful cabinets. It's got a systematic display on one side, and then it's got localities and different this is kind of a history of mineral discoveries in Russia. The case further towards the door is a new acquisitions case, which is beautiful. And then they have some just oddities, things organized by kind of color and uses and all kinds of fantastic things in here. Dmitry, for those of you who have never seen him, a lot of you have probably seen him at Tucson or at other mineral shows. They also have a big meteorite display. So they have some pretty old, fascinating meteorites. And this lady here is the keeper of the collection, and I think she was there as a security guard. And I made the mistake of touching, where is it? There in the center here is a big malachite vase, and I made the mistake of just kind of touching that, and she jumped up and just gave me a blast of shit in Russian. I have no idea what she was saying, but it was very vocal and very loud and a little bit frightening. So she kept her eye on me. This was before Dmitry had come in, so she kept her eye on me like for the whole time. And then when Dmitry came in, she kind of ignored me after that. But she was very carefully watching what was going on. Displays. This is our new acquisitions display here. This is actually a meteorite up here from 1803. This is a drawing from 1492 of a meteorite strike in Russia as well. So they have some pretty cool old historic samples. They have a beautiful fluorescent display at the back of the museum, for people that like fluorescent minerals. A lot of Franklin minerals, obviously. I like this little globe here of willemite. It's beautiful. And also some display and safety, safety methods that we don't have here. Most of our radioactive signs are not hand drawn and put into display cases with highly radioactive minerals. So the safety recommendations here are not as good as we have in this whole display of asbestos, which I thought was really cool. Different types and different habits just on display. So okay, and this is the famous mouse that's been coated in copper minerals that I think has been in many journals, and that it's a petrified mouse that's been basically mineralized. So, and that's about it. A shorter one for today. So if anybody has any questions, I'm open to them now. Any questions from anybody? Questions or comments? Either one. Yeah, so I'm going to publish this one. So the question is, lab in Mirny looked like it was on pilings. Yeah, all the buildings in Mirny and Yakutsk and all in that entire area are actually up on pilings. Everything is everything's on permafrost, so they're pilings that are driven deep into the ground, and the buildings are up above. And that's the other interesting thing is all the heating systems and pipes and everything are above ground because you couldn't put pipes, especially water pipes, hot water pipes and stuff into the permafrost or it would just melt it, or otherwise it would freeze. So everything, all the pipes and all the HVAC and everything that you would have normally underground in a building are kind of either along the sides of the building or underneath in the area, in the layer between the stilts and the actual base of the buildings. So it's kind of cool, actually. What's the next question? How spread out are the kimberlite localities? There's quite a few in Siberia. I couldn't tell you exactly what the number is. I'd have to look it up, but they are quite spread out in the region. What minerals replace the mouse? I forget, I'm gonna have to look it up. I completely forgot. They're copper minerals anyway. Calcanthite, I think, is one of them. What would be the best way to contact me? By email. I'll put my email address again in the general section, but what % of industrial versus gem diamonds are from the Canadian mines? That I don't know. I don't know what the production values are right now in some of the Canadian mines, but I can look it up and get back to you. Okay, I'm going to put my email there again for anybody who doesn't have it. I had an email from Steve saying he can't get in with the link, so I don't know if maybe there was a problem. If anybody else had a problem with the link, let me know, but it should have been okay. Atacamite there from Quinton. So the mouse is atacamite. Shungite from Russia. No. That's a quick answer. I can look it up though. Okay, so it seems quite expensive for the science students to have such an international gathering of judges. Is this typical of their student science fairs? No, it's not actually, but they wanted to kind of promote this, and it was part of a larger science festival. So one of the organizers got in touch with Rennie because he's involved with one of the international organizations, and asked if our national judge would be interested in helping them organize judges. So they actually there were a few international students that participated, but not many, and they asked if they actually paid our entire way and our accommodations and everything while we were in Yakutia to judge for the week that we were there. What is my next talk going to be about? That's a good question. If somebody has suggestions, that would be great. I might ask Ina to, one of our other mineralogists as well, to give a talk. She's actually Russian, and she has some interesting talks, so I might get her to give a talk as well. But if people do have suggestions, please send them to me. Any other questions? What are the prospects for the Canadian diamond mines? Well, there was just something on the news the other day, actually, that Dominion diamond is having a problem. It's just the diamond market right now is not great. I mean, I don't think the market for anything right now is great. So they're having problems. They're gonna have to start laying people off and that. But that's probably the case for a lot of the other diamond mines. If there's not enough demand for production, then that's going to be the case. But I think that in terms of the resources available, yeah, I think they're going to be going on for a while. I think there's quite a few pipes up there that could be mined, and it's certainly, I think it's a great opportunity for people to for jobs in the north, for one thing, and to develop an industry up there. And the companies that are working up there are very sensitive to the Inuit land rights, Inuit culture, and actually hiring locals as part of their production teams in the mines and everything. So I think the industry is fairly good. It's just a matter. It's just a matter of whether the yeah, there is a sorry, there is a lag, by the way. Yeah, it's just a matter if the market's going to hold up at this point in time. I mean, I don't think a lot of people are going out and buying a lot of diamond jewelry right now if people have lost their jobs. So yes, there is a lag. There's a lag of about 10 to 30 seconds between what I say and receiving the message. That's just built into Teams Live. The Russian pipes are about the same age too. Have you heard about the new tool that detects man-made diamond from natural? No, I haven't. Thing is, nature's never perfect, right? So nature's always going to have a certain amount of defects in minerals and defects and other elements in a mineral, as opposed to man-made materials, man-made diamonds, man-made other gems, whatever, are always going to be pure. So that's one way you can tell between synthetics and natural materials. But the thing is that not everybody has those tools to be able to do that. Yeah, De Beers used to control the market. That's true, but I'm not sure if the Russian market is doing that as well. I mean, it's just a matter of production, right? Like how much they're actually producing and the quality. And the Alrosa is producing quite a high amount of diamonds. So the diamond industry is really based on, from the jewelry point of view anyway, it's based on what people will buy. So if there's people out there that are crazy enough to spend, you know, huge quantities of money on diamonds, they can keep the prices at that high. That's not a problem. The industrial diamonds are a different thing, because those are, nobody wants them for jewelry anyway, and there's a kind of a better, more realistic market there. But the diamond jewelry industry really is driven by customer demand and really what the market will pay. It's like the mineral industry, right? Like if you dealers will try and get the money that they think people will spend for different mineral samples. Like, I think some of the prices are ridiculous, but people will spend that money, so why won't they ask for huge amounts of money? Okay, so it's after 1, and we'll leave it at that for now. If you have any other questions or anything, you can email me directly. And if you have suggestions for next week's talk, contact me as well. And then I'll send a link around by the end of this week, so you have it earlier the day before, like I did this week. Sorry for that. So everybody have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.